everyone. This is Carlos Garrido from Midwest of Marx. Shooting a video today in a quite unusual setting, but I wanted to talk about a recent thing that I saw Eddie did a video on with Jackson Hinkle and Hassan, and the topic of what constitutes a class. And I think that although there's in the classics of Marx and Engels, and Marx specifically, he never sits down to systematically describe what constitutes a class. There's glimpses here and there, specifically in the political works, that help you understand what it is that he's thinking about when he thinks about a class. He actually, in one of the manuscripts that eventually becomes what's published as Volume 3 of Capital, in the last one, he starts his analysis of what constitutes a class, but the manuscript breaks off within a couple paragraphs. But what constitutes a class in Marxism? It's such a fundamental question, because it is the philosophy and the theory for the liberation of the working class, where we toss the term class around all the time, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is that we mean by class. But there's two elements, there's two components that I think are present in the work of Marx that give you a hint as to what one means by class. The first one is a group's relationship to production, and I think that most people who are somewhat read in Marxism understand this this component, right? A group's relation to production. Then this component would show you that the working class is the working class as such, because in general it has this one specific relationship as a group to production. What this also lets you know is that there's it's not a homogeneous group. There's different, although there's a general point that that lets them as a class be a propertyless class forced to sell their labor to make a wage. There's also differences that exist within this working class, and differences that exist in how this general component relates to other particular components. There's different sorts of relationships that a specific industry has to the national and international economy that constitutes different relationships of power that the working class in that specific industry can have to the general economy. For instance, in an economy that is agricultural based, the relation of the workers to agricultural forms of production is going to be one which entails a lot more leverage, a lot more power than workers in other industries that are not related to the core of what the country's national income is constituted of. So that's one definition, a group's relation to the mode of production. I think quite a few people understand this one, but what they don't understand is that you need to also account for these smaller differences where one group of workers exists in a position that touches perhaps a lot more closer to what we have discussed as the pressure points of a specific economy. That if that group of workers goes on strike because of the nature of the particular circumstance in which they're working at, they have a lot more leverage than another group of workers might have. The second definition, which is a lot less known, comes from the 18th Brumaire and Louis Bonaparte, and he says something along the lines of a class being a group that distinguishes itself from another group according to its mode of life and culture. So this is a really interesting way of compartmentalizing classes. And what I think that we find in this specific way of thinking about class in terms of culture and in terms of the mode of life is that we have in the analysis of class the ability to analyze racial, religious, or ethnic differences depending on the countries, differences that bifurcate the working class in general. We're able to analyze them through a class lens because Marx is already describing the mode of life and culture as itself constitutive of what a class is. So, for instance, you might have a black community that engages in the same relations of production with other white workers, and that might be joint as a working class. But then when you look at the particularities of their mode of life and culture, there's differences, right? When a black worker leaves the workplace, the treatment that he gets from other state institutions and other sorts of apparatuses are different than what white workers might receive, right? And this constitutes a difference in the mode of life and in the culture, which also has to be accounted for. Now, this doesn't mean that we should start just in a very nominalist way, just separating workers into distinct camps because of either their specific relationship to the pressure points of an economy or because of their cultural and differences in the modes of life that they carry out. But it also entails that we have to do a lot better a job at scientifically analyzing how we think about class. And specifically in the US, we had a movement in 2008 during the Occupy Wall Street that began to analyze class in terms of the 99 versus the 1%. And although that's relatively helpful because it shows you that, you know, there's a big chunk of the population that doesn't benefit from capitalism and a small chunk that does, it also blurs differences in economic and cultural analysis that have to be made in order to properly understand the different standpoints that each class is in and the different standpoints that each group within a specific class is in. The way that we have referred to it in the past, the way that Eddie and I have thought through it, is that the working class that engages directly in the moment of production, which for Marx is the point of departure. Before you can have service work, you need to have that tangible good which your service is servicing. So that point of departure that exists in the moment of production, that I think is what directly Marx was referring to when he thought about the proletarian class. That's what that's the core of capitalist economy. Without that initial form of exploitation and extraction of surplus value, you cannot have the other moments of production and the labor that is partaken in the other moments of production. So we have usually sought to classify that group as the working class or use the term proletariat for it. And then everyone who has this general relationship to their jobs where they are not property owners, who are forced to sell their labor, that constitutes a working mass. This might not be the best way to address it. There's probably better ways to address it that have been thought about before, but it is an attempt to both understand the general and the particular in relationship specifically to the economic pressure points in a society and to the cultural differences that exist within the working class itself. So I hope this clarified some things, and yeah, thanks for watching.